Hello there. Happy Friday here at the Chuck ToddCast. This is a bit of a bonus episode. I'm not always going to drop 4 in a week, but this has been one of those weeks. And yeah, I know in the Trump era, there's always one of those weeks. And that's always a word of warning sometimes, right? Just when you think, oh my God, can it get any crazier? Something else will happen and it will get crazier. But I do think trying to understand the most important thing on the Trump tariff pullback, right? That we all know he blinked. I think it's important to figure out how he got there, because understanding how he got there will then tell us, I think, give us at least a better idea of how to be prepared for what is still going to be an uncertain economic climate for at least the next 3 months. Possibly, if it's as tumultuous as it still looks, we're looking at what's going to be just a tumultuous 18 months until the voters decide if they want to have a say here on the direction of our economy. But the fact of the matter is, while Trump sort of stopped what was turning into the beginnings of a Republican revolt on this, and certainly a major donor revolt on his policies, he has staved that off. But it's not as if he can go back and slapdash this on and hope that the same thing won't happen again. So my guest today is Marc Caputo, and I think Marc Caputo, of all the Trump beat writers, probably has the best insight on how this version of Trump world operates. And I say this version because I said it in the previous update, and I'll say it again, which is the biggest mistake everybody has made with Trump 2.0 is assuming Trump 1.0 was a blueprint or a model. I think it is pretty clear now Trump 1.0 was the Mike Pence presidency, was the Reince Priebus, because it was Mike Pence and Reince Priebus who built that cabinet, who built that staff, who built that team. I'd probably throw Jared Kushner in there as sort of the third guy in here, that Kushner, Priebus, and Pence were stabilizing forces for conventional economic thinking, conventional national security thinking, and conventional day-to-day governance of the larger entity that is the federal government. And it's pretty clear that by the time Trump got to the end of his first term, he knew exactly what happened, right? He went through 4 national security advisors because he didn't like any of them. He went through 4 chiefs of staff until he got the most compliant one in Mark Meadows, right? So when he built Trump 2.0, he made sure he wasn't going to have somebody that wasn't essentially loyal to his vision, loyal to his ideas, and he certainly wasn't going to use his running mate pick to quote unquote build a bridge to another wing of the party. Now, look, he had to pick Mike Pence because he needed to try to heal. He needed to try to reach out to a wing of the party that was skeptical of him, the evangelical community. And he thought Pence would help him with that, as well as mainstream conservatives. And then he didn't know anything about how Washington worked. And so he delegated a lot of authority to Mike Pence. And Mike Pence, I think, as the more people are learning about the job he did and the things he did that we didn't see every day, there's a core competency to Mike Pence. You may have some ideological disagreements on certain ideas that he had out there, but he had a core competency to him. And it was something that came through during COVID, something that when you talk to a lot of governors, Democrat or Republican, that were on those COVID calls, the chaos was Trump's. The planning and getting organized was Pence. So the point is that we have to stop using anything. This is one of those things where if I could erase everybody's brains of Trump 1.0, don't let it make any impact on you, on how you think Trump 2.0 is going to go or is operating. It is more different than it is the same. This is a brand new style of governing. Yes, he tested the electric fences in the first term and found out where vulnerabilities were and where they weren't. But it is not lost on me that there's essentially 2 holdovers from his first term. Stephen Miller, who is clearly now the keeper of the grievance list as they come up with plans to go get people this Chris. The chilling effect of launching these investigations against anybody that was essentially a whistleblower in his first term, Chris Krebs, who was in the cybersecurity space for the federal government, who was the first Trump-appointed official to say this election was on the up and up. We're going to discuss this, and I discussed this with Marc Caputo in a minute, but I do think that you got to see what this is for. The chilling effect that this administration, and it's more orchestrated by Stephen Miller than it is Trump. One thing about Trump is that he has plenty of grievances, but he's usually a bit too lazy to execute revenge fantasy. He has revenge fantasies, but actually to execute the revenges. But Stephen Miller has the patience and the bandwidth to do all these things. And these lawsuits, these investigations, sending FBI agents to Chris Krebs' house and to Miles Taylor's house. Yes, it's about rattling them, and it's a little bit about revenge, but it's also about sending a message to anybody in the current administration. If you're going to speak out, you might make the list, and be careful. It's why, you sit here. I saw there's a few lawmakers that would like to see an investigation to see if there was any insider trading, if Donald Trump was trying to give investors a heads up or different people when he made his what seemed like a vague tweet about this is a good time to buy. Did he already know? Was he already giving insider trading? Do we think that the current iteration of the SEC is going to investigate? I mean, I would argue that there's a lot of shenanigans that take place. Now, part of the difficulty with trying to figure out is Donald Trump doing insider information, or is he just simply being Donald Trump, overly telegraphing every move he makes, right? He is also somebody who happens to overly telegraph everything he does. And there's, and I'm sure there are people that simply speak Trumpism and just used his Twitter feed or his X feed or his Truth Social feed, whatever we're promoting these days, as the guidepost to this. So look, I don't think you're going to get investigations, and you're not going to get many whistleblowers, because I think Donald Trump has come to the conclusion that whistleblowers and internal watchdogs were some of the biggest sources of his political problems in his first term, and he wants to eliminate as much of that friction as he can. But ultimately, the reason I'm dropping this special pod is because I think Marc Caputo is going to be able to paint a picture for you and to understand who's on the end, who's got his ear in the moment, who doesn't have his ear in the moment, right? Who got benched in this? I'm looking at you, Peter Navarro. What is the status of Howard Lutnick, right? Does he have a sell-by date? Well, everybody in Trump world is a sell-by date. We just don't always know what date's on the milk carton. But is it sooner or is it later? All these things you're going to learn in this interview. But I do think it's helpful to understand we're all trying to figure out what guardrails were working with him. And there was a moment where it didn't look like there was going to be any guardrails on these tariffs, but it turns out there is. Is it rich people calling him and they all have his cell phone number? Is it them that did it? Is it the bond market that did it? Is it members of Congress? Whatever it was, the combination of all of it did serve as a temporary guardrail here on at least pulling back on the most catastrophic parts of this tariff policy. We're not out of the woods. And by no means is this a healthy economy right now. And I'll be honest with you, I don't see how this gets better for him. I don't see how in this moment he's going to be talking companies into putting shovels into the ground and building factories in this uncertain business climate. So how does he incentivize that? For this tariff policy idea to work, and I'm skeptical it's going to work because, again, I equate it to trying to rescue the ice block industry. Refrigeration is what works now. We don't use blocks of ice. You're not going to stop the global economy. You can't just somehow stop it in its tracks, rebuild it somewhere else without having massive, catastrophic collateral damage. And I'll tell you one other thing that I want to leave you with that the tariffs are already leading to is that there's already been some business surveys out there that I've gotten my hands on that there is already an uptick in anti-Americanism, and it's going to impact companies that are associated with America. So already I know some Fortune 500 companies who have gotten some data where they're being told, hey, be prepared for this. If you sell products in Europe, if you sell products in the free parts of Asia, don't be surprised if you see some, form some boycotts, things like this, because there's a lot of anger at America right now over these tariffs. And that's the thing that I think is being undersold to this. He may believe this is going to help Americans, but if it ends up incentivizing American hate around the world and American hate of our companies and our economy, that doesn't lead to good outcomes for the long-term security of the United States. So on that uplifting note, on this Friday, particularly this Friday before Passover, I'm going to sneak in a break here. And when we come back, my buddy from Miami, one of the most plugged in reporters that understands how this Trump White House currently works and who's closest to the Game of Thrones, who's the hand to the king these days. It is Mr. Marc Caputo. So joining me now is the person who I think has the best pulse on the Trump White House. It's not an easy thing, and we're going to discuss how do you know when to take a Trump source at their word, which is one of the great sort of enigmas trying to that Washington produces these days. But Marc Caputo of Axios, the beat writer for Trump. I guess what's your official title for Axios? Let me get it right.
What White House reporter, Trump White House reporter, national political reporter, some sort of mix thereof.
Just to give a little bit of your credentials for those that don't realize it, one of the reasons you're on this beat, you're sort of the king of Florida reporting. I've known for so long, political reporting, and the Trump White House is now basically produced by Florida power brokers. Donald Trump became a Floridian of sorts and became the Florida power broker.
Oh, he's a total Florida man. Let's be clear.
He is now. I know.
100%.
100%.
Right down to the fact that he's from New York. Right.
But you are the first sort of beat writer not based in Washington for the White House. You are actually based in Miami. You come up a lot. Don't get me wrong. You were kind enough to speak to my USC class a couple weeks ago. And that was very fascinating. But here you are. And I guess the number one question I have after the gyrations of the week with trade and tariff is, we know Donald Trump never makes a mistake. So the question is, who takes the fall? It appears Peter Navarro is been benched for a while. Now we know you can be benched. That doesn't mean you're ostracized. There's a difference. There's ostracizing, there's benching, and then there's still in the inner circle. Howard Lutnick is the first person I want to ask about, because if the next after Navarro, he is the person seen as the architect of this disaster. Who's getting blamed here?
I think you probably hit it on the head. The interesting thing about Lutnick is that he's got so many critics in the administration, and I think a lot of it just boils down to his style. He is this outer borough backslapping, like, hey, I gotta tell you something. And he's got a lot of these Trumpy qualities where like no one knows finance better than I. Now, don't get me wrong, or me. I mean, he's a billionaire, self-made man, etc. But, in the Trump White House, or it's like Highlander, right? There can only be one.
There only can be one. But that's the thing. Like, it is always funny to me to watch Republican members of Congress. Who is giving him this bad advice? Who is telling him to do these things? And you're like, wow, it can't be dear leader. We know this. So who's the bad whisperer here, right? Like, so
Donald Trump has wanted to do that. Let's just be clear. Donald Trump has wanted to do this for 30 years or whatever it was when he first talked about running. The reason he had Peter Navarro there was to cook up a formula. And the formula he cooked up, according to every analyst, who knows what they're talking about, was just absurd. The columns were wrong, but it gave Trump what he needed. And so Navarro sort of served his purpose. But I want to be clear about Lutnick is while I understand all the reporting that's been done
Mm-hmm.
about people being annoyed with him and, oh, he went off script and, oh, he did
Yeah.
this.
Mm.
As of now, and this could change in 5 minutes between when you post it, as of now, Howard Lutnick is in good stead. I mean, it's basically like him, the Commerce Secretary, and the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. And Bessent is sort of the leader, but they're operating sort of in tandem. And if Lutnick was really on the outs this way,
Yeah.
he wouldn't be on television all the time. And he's
No,
on television all the time.
I take that I tell you what reeked of desperation of him when he wanted to let everybody know he was in the White House at the moment giving that tweet out. And that told me he clearly wanted to send the message. I'm not on the outs. I'm not getting blamed here. I'm
Not
sitting
dead
with
yet.
dear leader. Right. And it was like, it really was sort of a proof of life, right? The way he worded that tweet. So it told me he certainly was worried he was going to get scapegoated. How's that?
Yeah, he knows and his people know that there are multiple people in and around the administration that don't like him.
Mm-hmm.
And even though he's a billionaire, he bought a $30 million house in the DC area. And he wants to be able to live in it for more than a few months before he kind of has to go back home.
By the way, the high-end real estate market in DC, my goodness, between Mark Zuckerberg, Howard Lutnick, I mean, the first administration, it was really just Wilbur Ross that truly planted some expensive stakes into this. Boy, this is another level. There does feel as if a lot of people feel the need that to get close to dear leader, you've got to live here. You've got to have a house here.
One of you talking about the sort of the dear leader dynamic, there's a really good history book called The World by Simon Sebag Montefiore. And at the very beginning of it, he points out how potentates throughout history have courts that are characterized by the closeness to power equals the more power you have.
I'm glad you just used that phrase. That's exactly, this is his court, right?
Totally.
You know, he has certain people that he wants in it to play with until he's tired of them.
Right.
And by the way, and he'll get tired of them. We know this. We just don't know in what order do they get ostracized and replaced.
Yeah. I mean, not to engage too much in the sort of the Trump world survivor, but yeah, I guess it's sort of down. The betting markets are probably down, are most likely to forecast either Lutnick departing or NSA, the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz.
Oh, which one goes first?
In the signal gate. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're a betting man, you know.
All right, but let's talk about, because I think the biggest fear many folks had, including myself, was what if, I think we all assumed the markets were going to be a guardrail with Trump on these policies. And for the entire weekend, you're like, oh no, what if this is Thelma and Louise? What if he's like, you know what? I ain't running again. I always wanted to do this. I believe in it. And I'm never going to be poor. What do I care? Let's go. Right. And then he did finally change course. What did it? Is it who spooked him? Who scared him? Who had the ear? Who is the real guardrail here? Is it Bessent?
From my reporting, which I wrote, is that there were basically 3 factors that combined to have Trump change his mind. Number one, he was hearing from every possible CEO. So
and they all have him on speed dial, don't they?
Correct.
Between him and her, they all have these 2 cell phones, so they were getting direct agitated calls, correct?
Yeah. So correct, and that's there. But the 3 factors, bottom line, was Bessent and Lutnick went in there certainly with the hope of getting a pause, and so their pitch was, hey, we got 75 countries that want to make a deal now, and we don't have the time and staff to do this. Like, let's sort of and they didn't say, let's do this. Apparently they said, what do you want to do? Right? Like, because you don't tell Donald Trump what to do, but you
lead him to the decision.
You lead him to the Hobson's choice, right? You know?
Right. Yeah.
So that was one. The second one that was part of it was China. Hey, China came out and disrespected you with raising the tariffs. And now you have this golden opportunity of doing a pause, making a deal with everyone and isolating China and putting a ring around China. And then the third one, and this is probably not in order if you think about it, was just the bond market and the stock market. But really, like the bond traders are still, that's still the spine of the being of the vertebrate of the United States and perhaps global financial markets.
It
And
is gold. It is the gold bar of the 21st century. Gold bars are great. Treasury bonds
are greater.
Are greater. Yes.
So it was sort of those three factors. It was not just sort of one person, and no, it wasn't necessarily Bill Ackman out there pounding away on Twitter like, "Oh,
really?
Please,
Bill Ackman's tweets didn't have an impact. I'm shocked.
No, they did not. You're talking about it's like coffee plantation or something, like, heart goes out to you. But Trump, what's always interesting about Trump, especially the more time you give him, is while he is not known for telling the truth, is that there is a sodium pentothal quality about Trump.
He always tells you.
Correct. You've just got to kind of figure out the wheat and the chaff. Yeah, he's like,
he did it yesterday.
People were
it's the bond market. Yeah. And yet, dear leader, Levitt, the Baghdad Bob, God, what is she doing?
She's doing what she's supposed to do. That's her job.
I guess, but it really does feel like Baghdad Bob has met North Korea between that and these reports about his golfing. I mean,
I don't know, man.
I mean,
what I found interesting over the past week, and I of all weeks to take off, I took last week off because I had some personal things.
Oh, please. I used to tell this of people that, I told this to my friend Kristen Welker once, who was paranoid that she was going to miss something during the first term. I'm like, first of all, yes, you're going to miss something. But I promise you, literally, the day you get back, there'll be 7 new developments that will make it irrelevant that you missed something. Mark, I say the same thing to you. I'm sure you really actually did miss a thing.
Well, it's always kind of good to be in the flow. But what was notable for me throughout the process here was that this is a team that he has assembled that believes in him. And they weren't sending the words like, oh my God, because if this were Trump number 1, like the Trump 1.0, Trump 45, White House, there would have been all these reports about this guy's crazy. This guy's
Jared
mad.
Kushner would have done their official leak to the Vanity Fair reporter that they used to do.
Priebus would have.
Yeah, they all had their leakers.
Happen. Like literally when you talk to the guy, I'd be like, you sure you guys aren't nervous? Like, well, but this is what he campaigned on, they said, which is not fully true. Donald Trump didn't campaign on the idea like, hey,
trade war with the entire world. Yeah.
Trade war with the entire world. And by the way, you're going to have to swallow some pain here, right?
No,
he didn't talk about
just the opposite.
Right.
Prices. I mean, I remember, it was sort of like Kamala equals high prices, Trump equals low prices. Like that was they were putting out yard signs that said that towards the end. I mean,
he talked about the Kamala crash, just everything.
It's interesting comparing Trump 1 and Trump 2 because there was a whole group of voters who told us, well, they thought that Trump 1 wasn't so bad, right? And it turns out, well, Trump 1 was an entirely different administration. Trump 1 was the Mike Pence, Reince Priebus administration. Those two basically filled the cabinet, filled the White House staff for the first year, and in some ways, it ended up populating in parts for the entire 4 years. And it was a series of essentially professional conservatives who were guardrails on Donald Trump's crazy. Donald Trump figured that out by a year or 2 into his first term and wasn't going to let that happen again.
Right. The people who are around him now are either the unconventional picks or true loyalists, or people who became true allies who knew what they were getting into. The latter category, I put Mark.
Who decided they wanted the accent, that they were willing to trade their potential reputation. By the way, what do you make of, you said that there wasn't many leaks. There was somebody friendly to Bessent who was leaking, he wants, and you and I both know Trump isn't going to like that.
No.
And I wonder how much leeway Bessent's going to get, or if he better fix that at some point.
Yeah. I don't want to name names, but I'm pretty sure I know who leaked that story to Politico about Bessent flying back.
Yeah.
with Trump flying down there. What was totally left out of the story was that Howard Lutnick was there at Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump and flew back with Bessent and was basically saying the same thing. But you often find this in politics where the lieutenants of the principal, right, where the cardinals around their little pope hate the other pope so much more
Yep.
than, the kind of the rival popes would sort of hate each other, dislike each other. And in that case, though, it is true that Bessent has essentially been elevated more by Trump to be the tariff guy. I think Lutnick is a little too Trumpy for Trump's taste.
Yeah.
And Trump wants more of a cerebral, calm, cool, collective chess player instead of the sort of more wild man, crazy trader that trader, not traitor, by the way,
Right.
that
Yeah.
Lutnick is.
The by coincidence, before Trump made his announcement, Owen Cass, who is sort of more of an ideological guy, who's been sort of works at one of the think tanks that are trying to create an intellectual argument for Trumpism. We can debate, some of these, but he at least laid out a way you could have done all this
Yes.
that would have given some
Yes.
certainty given the business community time to absorb, given trading partners time to negotiate. Should we look at that as the model now? Are they now going, okay, let's try to be more orderly about this? And should we expect something a bit more orderly going forward, or is Trump going to get impatient again?
Yes and yes.
Yeah,
You're right. I think so. I think there's more of an orderly process. One of the things I made sure to avoid in the story that I wrote about, what sort of led up to Trump putting the pause was, everyone in the administration was like, "Oh my God, Donald Trump, art of the deal, grand strategist." Like, no, folks, this is Donald Trump sort of trial and error and experimenting with things in real time. And
Right.
I think he had to touch the hot stove a few times
Yeah.
to realize, like, oh, wow, it really burns. But
Well,
conversely, he also
the market's
realized that
getting as we're talking now, the market, it was a one-day reprieve, right? About
Right.
half of it's been given back because we
they
are
don't
in a
like the
full-on
policy.
trade war with China. I mean,
And
that's a
they
real
don't
thing.
like, generally speaking, this is where Trump perhaps is directionally right, is that, yeah, the stock market is a global financial
Correct.
issue. This is the globalists. And when you try to do an America first, I'm putting it in air quotes as much as scare quotes. When you do an America first policy to import jobs or grow your domestic manufacturing and change the United
Yeah.
States economy, the globalists sort of punish you for it.
The biggest problem Donald Trump has right now is, one of the things that I would look, I think if he wanted to do this, he should have done his tax cut first. And by the way, let me ask about that. Is there any regret that they misordered this? Because he could have essentially given people their tax cut, given the business community what they wanted, certainty on that, and then done this, a carrot and stick approach. I think this tax cut's going to get harder and harder to get. I think we're seeing right now the more uncertainty in the actual economy, the more you're going to have resistance trying to do this Republican alone. Is there anybody in that West Wing right now that wonders if they basically misordered their agenda?
I think the answer to that is yes, but they're not telling me. So you can sort of hear it in their voice, which is just like, oh, it is what it is. That's sort of the guiding principle.
I mean, the tax cut, even if they get it now, it's not going to have any, people aren't going to feel like it had any impact on their lives. Not whatsoever, because you're going to have this inflationary period.
That's possibly true, but Trump feels really strongly about wanting to do this. And you hear when he talks, like, no other president could do this or would do this. Like, yeah, part of the reason no other president would do this is you saw what happened with the stock market. But this is, the reality is he's the captain of this ship, as that.
And here's the other thing they gave up, Mark, is they gave up the ability to blame Biden for the economy now. This is now all Donald Trump's economy. Like he created this shakiness now, for better or for worse. Obviously, if it works, he gets a bunch of credit. But right now, and you're seeing it in the, look, it's YouGov and Quinnipiac, both of whom I could have methodological arguments about why I don't trust. I think both polls can over exaggerate the moment, but directionally they're in the same place. His numbers, approval on the economy, look as bad as Biden.
They're not looking good, and I'm not sure it's going to get much better, because in the end, if you want to change the United States into more of a manufacturing society, you have to have manufacturing plants, and we really don't have them.
Where's the shovel? Where's any shovel going into the ground on a new factory? Like, if I were Donald Trump, I'd be desperate for that symbol right now. I'd go to the opening if I could find some company to break ground on some t-shirt factory that is moving from Vietnam, right? Like, one thing I thought Trump was usually smart about was sort of symbolistic showmanship, and they don't even have that.
They don't have that, and on a more granular level, a good example is wood, right? Again, they're talking about we have tariffs on Canada now. I live in the Southeast. A lot of the construction 2x4s we use here are made out of southern yellow pine, but the Canadian pine is superior wood. And the reality is, Canada's got a lot more forest and a lot more pine than the United States does. So if you want to kind of grow the United States timber industry, you need to grow trees, but you can't grow pine trees in 3 years.
Not overnight.
Right?
Yeah.
4 years.
You're not doing it overnight.
Same thing with building manufacturing plants. Just doesn't happen.
I want to ask you about the Chris Krebs thing and the Miles Taylor thing, because it does seem as if, is there a list? Is he going down a list of like, okay, I'm going to get my revenge? Is it Stephen Miller? Is there somebody that's the keeper of this? Because Donald Trump forgets half the enemies that he has. So it's clear to me.
I don't know if he does about that sort of thing.
But I am curious, is just Miller and just assisting in executing the plan, or is he the keeper of the flame on this stuff?
Donald Trump is surrounded by people who do, maybe to your point, who are sort of the bearer of his grudges, and they do remind him of who wronged him. And so who reminded him? He didn't even really know who Chris Krebs was.
Right.
About Chris Krebs. I think he sort of knew who Miles Taylor was, but Krebs is sort of a lesser character. But yes, there are people around him who say those sorts of things and sort of remind him. There is always the ongoing effort among his advisors to try to minimize the encounters he has where he has to spend time on grievance stuff. And he kind of focuses more on his day job. What I wonder about the investigations that he essentially authorized or called for of Krebs and Taylor is how serious it's going to be. I know Pam Bondi. I've known her for a number of years. She used to be the Florida Attorney General. That's not really her style, but then again, this is Kash Patel, a name of someone who did keep an enemies list, who would be in charge or is going to be in charge of investigating this. So how wholehearted this is going to be is an open question. I don't know what they're going to find.
Are they really doing an investigation, or are they sending a message to any potential whistleblower in Trump 2.0?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I do think they're going to get visited by agents. They're going to have to lawyer up. A person I know, or some people I know from Trump 1.0, who got hauled before Congress, who had to hire lawyers, and were never charged, are so bitter at what happened that even though what Trump is now doing with Krebs, who really had nothing to do with the Russia stuff.
Yeah, all he did was
say, the election wasn't
stolen.
Say
the truth. Yeah, he told the truth.
There was a faction in Trump world. There are some legitimately aggrieved people who are just out for blood. And that also populates sort of the broader Trump courts.
Is that the role Todd Blanche is supposed to play at DOJ? That he's there to sort of make other people's lives miserable?
I think that's probably more Kash Patel.
He executes the investigations, but it seems like Blanche is...
Blanche and Beauvais. Brett, those are just people. Remember, Donald Trump wanted loyalists and people he could trust. And Todd Blanche, the deputy attorney general, really burned the ships to come work for Trump. He left, he had to leave a job from another law firm because law firms would not let their lawyers work for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He basically sold everything, moved to Florida. He was all in. And so Blanche has also sort of internalized that same thing of it's us versus them. Yeah. Again, I'm not justifying it.
No.
Totally. Yeah.
That's what I was curious. Like, how much of this is a piece of paper more to threaten the current, mid-level staffers who might get, ideas in their head that, hey, I work for the taxpayers. Maybe I ought to tell the truth, right? That happens for a lot of even political appointees. They sort of, they can feel the weight and they start to, waver. So it did feel like a message.
I think it's just more. I think it's more revenge rather than foresight.
You really think it's revenge?
I just do. It's like whoever's around. And yes, it does sort of
slippery slope stuff.
It is.
Slope stuff.
It is. I think it sends a message. In addition to that, remember, they're not particularly worried in the broader Trump orbit here about whistleblowers and future lawsuits, because when this president leaves office, every single person who worked for him whom he likes is going to get a full and complete pardon for everything ever from now until the beginning of time.
Every single person will get a pardon if
I think so, yeah.
If he deems them worthy. Yes, I was just going to say. So if you turn on him at all, or you cause him in his head political harm, he may not give you that pardon.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think everyone who decided to get on board the USS Donald Trump knew the score.
So I'm going to take advantage of something I learned from you when we last saw each other about a week or so ago about HHS. And what's intriguing to me is, look, lost in all of the tariff, the liberation from our savings day that took place last week, was the fact that Bobby Kennedy Jr. said that the measles vaccine was the best way to prevent measles. He shows up in the community. That doesn't seem like a decision Bobby Kennedy Jr. made on his own. Is that what is happening here? And is this becoming a West Wing project to try to minimize the damage Bobby Kennedy Jr. is doing to them almost on a daily basis in this world?
Well, I did a story a few weeks ago about how the White House has had to open up a parallel press shop to handle messaging from HHS because it's been such a mess under Kennedy. And that's largely because he has this loyalist who's been with him this entire time, who has insisted on controlling all things about his messaging and his press. And she's bad at the messaging. Her name is Stephanie Spear. And she has terrible press relations. Her press relations are to not talk to the press. And so the White House has, in many respects, taken over. Now, I don't have any insight into how the measles evolution occurred, but it's pretty clear that over time, what started to cause real problems in the White House was just the bad way in which his administration didn't publicly respond to the measles outbreak. Like, these are generally kind of pretty easy things to do. Disasters are. And he didn't really follow it. And so the short answer to your question is yes, they are sort of taking the reins a little more. And what's interesting with Kennedy is some of his base from the anti-vax and
I saw that they got angry at him. How dare you recommend a vaccine that might save lives?
They are angry. And it's not just that. Weldon, Congressman Weldon, the former congressman from Florida, was up to be the head of CDC, and they yanked him. There are competing stories as to who called for the yanking, by the way, because it is, after all, Trump world. But that really,
I thought it was a Florida connection there.
I can't really tell who's telling the truth.
Okay.
But right.
We are
But
speaking a little in code, not to mess with sourcing, but yeah.
right, right. But one person led me to believe that the official narrative
Yeah.
that some members of the Senate don't want Weldon there. I was led to believe that that's not the full story, and it's much more sort of complicated than that.
Interesting. Well, that's always one of those you're like, God, there's so much else going on
Yeah.
sometimes that, boy, you'd love to go down that rabbit hole, but is it really worth your time when you've got to deal with day to day? And that actually leads me to sort of the difficulty. I think as a reporter, there's no better beat than Trump right now because it's so fascinating. There's so much going on. However, it's so hard to source up because you don't know how. Most of your sources are BSing you, but there's an art to it, and if you can decipher it, you actually can find the truth. But it takes time. Like, I feel like it's studying Trump, and I think I know how to decipher some of him, but I think you do a lot more. But how do you decide what the truth looks like when you deal with Trump officials?
Uh, Generally speaking, and I say this at my peril, is for the stories that I have done, I don't think I have been as lied to as perhaps other people. Uh, in part because I
Maybe you
haven't
know who
put.
to talk to? Yeah.
Well, that's part of it. You just have to also understand there are certain people, if you put them in a position, and this is not limited to this
Yeah.
administration.
Right.
There's certain people, you put them in a position to lie to you, they're going to lie to you.
Correct.
So
That is very true.
the ultimate problem in covering Trump is Trump is you can talk to the top people who just spoke to him, and they will tell you, hey, look, I've heard X, Y, and Z. And an hour later, you can call back and say, well, from what I'm gathering, it's not X, Y, and Z. It's A, B, and C. And then they will say, well, yeah, maybe that's true.
Oh,
Like,
I had that. I've had that experience a bunch
Totally.
of times. I've never had Trump. Well, you may have talked to somebody who's talked to him since, which is like, because so many of these guys have been burned themselves before, so they don't. They're
And just look at over the weekend.
Right.
Over the weekend, like Donald Trump was like, look, no deal, no negotiation,
Right.
no pause. In one of the kind of great meta examples of the relationship between Trump, the truth,
Yeah.
reality, and the media is there was a social media rumor or a Twitter post that got sort of misconstrued on Monday that Trump was
Walter
going to.
Bloomberg. Yeah.
That
The Walter Bloomberg. I'm Chuck
Right.
Reuters, by the way. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Sorry.
Mark NBC, right?
Yeah,
Mark Politico.
exactly.
And
Right.
like,
Mark
but
Politico.
but they reported that there was going to be a 90-day pause. Reuters picked it up.
Oh, by
did a
the way,
story.
is that
There's gonna be
now?
a 90-day pause?
Do we
Yeah.
now go back and say, hey, Walter Bloomberg was right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. And that's the thing with Donald Trump and the Trump administration. Like, things can be simultaneously true and untrue. And it's
Right.
just so there's just sort of a lot of approximation, and this is
Mhm.
what these
Okay.
folks are saying, and this is what these folks are saying. And so you have to do the kind of the synthesis between the thesis and the antithesis.
All right. Let me, I'm basically asking you to give me the internal temperature check on certain individuals here. We've been doing Howard Lutnick. We did Bobby Kennedy Jr. So let me ask about Elon
Waltz
Musk.
to a degree. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Musk.
What's
Remember,
his
Musk
standing
is
right now?
I mean, it's still pretty good, but the cabinet meeting that just ended, Trump made sure to go out of his way to praise how great Elon Musk is. But number one, like, the major charge of his work is done, which was to go in there, cause hell, get people fired, and
Yeah.
shake things up. And then secondly, he's a special government employee. His charge is supposed to end after 120 days.
hmm
And I think his time has come, and he's for this coming series of episodes in the Trump show in this season.
Yeah.
I think he's going to go out, but that does not mean he's gone from the Trump show. I think he's going to be a reappearing character.
Well, it's interesting. There were certainly a lot of congressional Republicans. I certainly talked to a couple of them who were rooting for the Democrats to do really well in that Wisconsin Supreme Court race if the
Mm.
fallout was
Yeah.
minimizing and distancing themselves from Musk.
Yeah. One of the smart things, or maybe it was one of the honest things that Musk's folks had done, I wrote the story at the time, is about 10 days before that election, they put out a memo saying if the Schimmel, I think is his name, the
Yeah.
candidate for the Wisconsin Supreme Court was more Trumpy, and if we got out the Trump voters,
Oh,
then he
yeah.
would win. So
So they were
created
setting up the explanation for the loss. Yeah.
correct. It wasn't Musk. I mean, but the Democrats have been bad on a lot of messaging, but one thing they've made sure to do is really kind of go after Musk. And Musk himself is just, he's picking fights with Peter Navarro, calling him
Right.
Peter Retardo, right, on social media.
Yeah, that was
Not a typical thing. That I haven't talked to the chief of staff, Susie Waz, about it, but that's not the kind of thing that she would necessarily like.
right. That was
But
the one thing she tried to minimize was staff on staff crime, right?
correct. But, Elon Musk is a different character, and when you talk to the rest of the staff about it, they'd be like, welcome to Trump world, right? This is how
Right.
we play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had, let me ask you, Marco Rubio. Rising, falling, staying the same.
Notably in the Wednesday, I'm not sure when this runs, cabinet meeting, Marco Rubio was seated at the right hand of the father.
Yeah.
So he's
Well, it is Secretary of State. It's usually, it is the cabinet post, the first cabinet post that becomes president, by the way, in the
so the
line of
two guys
succession.
that Donald Trump is in the White House are thrilled with is Rubio and Vance. And they have very
Just
similar
for their media performances, I assume.
their media
right?
performances. They both have the same quality of being able to describe very conservative, very Republican, very MAGA things, which if other people had said it would sound horrifying, and deliver it in a way. So both of them are in good stead. That having been said, there is, because it's Trump world, a faction, not in the White House, outside of the
Right.
White House, that doesn't like Marco Rubio, that calls him a neocon and a war pig.
Is that Laura Loomer and her Oppo research team?
I think it's fair to say that Laura is probably more allied with the people who would like to see someone else in that position.
Correct. Yeah.
And what's notable is that some of the firings and the purgings that happened at the National Security Council under Waltz all had ties to Rubio.
Oh, no. Well, I've heard another name that is toxic inside NSA. That is, if you have any ties to Tom Cotton.
That could be too. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
Rubio and Cotton, certainly in the past, were
Very much
really fellow
more
travelers.
symbiotic.
In fact, I remember was it in 2010 or was it 2014? When did Cotton first win?
They
No, it
both
would have been
won in
2012.
Cotton won in House in 2012, Senate in 2014, I believe.
Okay, yeah. So I remember
Rubio was 2010.
Cotton, Rubio was leading him around Miami actually for his initial Senate race. So they were very kind of similar at the time. But yeah, Rubio looked very strong. He shot out of the gate with a lot of wins and also implemented that catch and revoke program of finding the Hamasniks, in quotes.
I have to tell you that again is some border. I thought the Constitution applied to anybody in the United States. Anyway, that's going to be that's an interesting. This idea that, hey, we're going to monitor the social media feeds. Really?
They're using AI to do it too.
Yeah,
I mean,
this
is like
this is Big Brother shit. I mean, this is I don't think this is going to pass muster in court, but maybe they don't care. In some ways, losing in court they think is good PR.
With the Mahmoud Khalil case, maybe because he's a citizen, or not a citizen because he had legal permanent residency.
Yeah.
But for students here on student visas, I think the law is a little more on the administration side where they can start canceling people.
Well, it just depends on your definition of I mean, just that's thought. Anyway, borderline thought police stuff.
It's not borderline thought police stuff. It's very thought police stuff.
Very thoughtful. Yeah. Well, and that's the key. I just don't think it's constitutional.
There's an interesting. Sorry to, even though you'll cut it out. There's a really interesting case of a Spanish official who stopped in Miami in like, I don't know, when Reno was the
Mm,
attorney general under Clinton,
hmm.
and he had like $15,000 in undeclared cash. And they didn't know what to do with this guy. And so he's Mexican, actually. He was on his way to Spain. And so Reno, or the Secretary of State at the time, uh, exercised their authority to remove his ability to be in the United States. And Rubio's using that sort of case
Mm.
to hang his hat on his
Wow.
ability to have these powers. So
Wow. I
it all
just,
comes back to Miami.
it does. It just, to see him do stuff like this. There's a version of Marco Rubio that criticized the Cuban government for doing stuff like this.
Oh,
I'm
much,
just
100%. Yeah.
okay. Like that's what makes it so alarming to me, because he's executing orders that he would have criticized another country, particularly that country, Cuba, from doing that. Not to bring it all back to Miami, but there's that. Last one, and then I'm gonna let you go, because it's Florida, and I care about Florida politics. Byron
Yeah.
Donalds.
Oh,
This
yeah.
thing is
No, the
turning
Casey
into a juggernaut.
the Casey DeSantis story, if you ge everyone needs to go read the Miami Herald stories, the Tampa Bay Times stories.
Yeah.
Casey DeSantis is probably gonna run for governor, and her husband, the governor, had had established something called Hope Florida, which was
Yeah.
a charity, and it
Yeah.
turns out they got a Medicaid, company, a healthcare company that had run afoul of the law or overbilled the state
Hmm.
to settle with the state, and they diverted $10 million and sent it to
Jesus.
Casey DeSantis's charity, and they can't account for the money. It's a nonprofit. There's no 990s. That's the tax form you have to have.
Yeah.
There's no evidence of where the money went. So it's just 10 million gone. And Casey DeSantis, if she runs, and it looks like she will, was going to run on two things: that she's a mom and a cancer survivor, and that she
Yeah.
ran this Hope Florida thing that helped
Yeah.
people. And that one issue is now starting to really hurt
Yeah.
her, because for the first time, her husband is facing a Republican legislature, which is like,
Oh.
not so
I
fast.
I
What
was
happened to
with
the money?
I
Where's the data? Where are the 990s? Where are the forms? It's
I was
interesting.
with a longtime veteran of Florida Republican politics about a week or so ago, and he goes, "Hey, it's really funny the way Ron DeSantis thinks he's governor still." Was the line he gave to me. And I
Right.
went, "Wow, is it that bad in Tallahassee?" He goes, "Oh yeah." He
Where
goes,
it's amazing.
he
It's
can't get any,
amazing.
well, look, you rode the tiger,
Uh-huh.
and he thought he won,
And he wound
and
up
he
inside
didn't.
it. Yep.
That's right. Yep.
Yep.
No,
Yeah.
it is what it is. Marc Caputo, I hope you are a regular unofficial cast member, making
I would
lots of
love to be.
cameos on the Chuck ToddCast.
That'd be great.
You no, like I said, nobody understands the Game of Thrones that is Trump world like you.
Well, I appreciate it. I think there's some other people, but I'll take the compliment.
No, there is,
So,
but
yeah.
you're my favorite narrator. How's that?
Awesome. I'll take
All
it.
right.
Thank you.
Yeah, the George R.R. Martin of this generation for this administration. See you, my friend.
See you, man.
All right, that's it for this edition of the Chuck ToddCast. I'm going to keep this a bit short. I got a Seder to prepare for. I love Passover, Jewish Thanksgiving. It's my second favorite holiday after American Thanksgiving. So, for those of you that celebrate that, I hope you have a nice Seder. If you're not Jewish and you have been invited to a Seder, go. The most Seders are entertaining, a lot of fun, and you might accidentally learn something too when you're that. But if you ever get invited to one, you should take the invite up. It's an interesting thing to observe and participate in. So with that, for those of you that celebrate that holiday, and I know we're preparing for many of the Christian holidays coming up at the end of next week with Good Friday and Easter. So with that, I hope you travel safely if you're traveling. Enjoy time with your family. And I will see you on all of these channels again soon, until we upload again.